You are living through something unprecedented, not in a poetic sense, not in a metaphorical way, truly, genuinely, cosmically unprecedented. Because for the third time in recorded history, an object has entered our solar system from the stars, not from the Oort cloud, not from a known orbit, but from the void. And unlike Oumuamua or Borisov, this one has not just passed us by, it has stopped. Its name is 3I Atlas, interstellar, hyperbolic, repeating no known path, and something about it doesn't make sense. No, many things don't make sense. Why is it decelerating when it should be slingshotting away? Why is it pulsing with an 8-to-1 carbon dioxide signature no known comet displays? Why are its closest passes not random, but eerily aligned with planetary orbits, including Mars, and now Earth? What you're about to uncover is not wild speculation. It's what scientists are too afraid to say aloud, because something about 3I Atlas is following a script, and now the next page is turning. A final trajectory shift has placed the object on a course so precise, so deliberate, it's made even the skeptics pause, because its path now ends not near the sun, but at a point close enough to Earth to trigger protocols. Protocols not designed for comets, protocols designed for threats. The ancient Sumerians wrote of a red messenger from Sagittarius, whose return would shake the sky gods awake. NASA's Deep Space Network has gone silent on specific data, rerouting public feeds. And for the first time, amateur astronomers are detecting artificial harmonics in the object's wake frequencies that don't belong in nature. The final target of 3I Atlas is not a mystery anymore. It is an arrival, a rendezvous, maybe even a delivery. But for whom? And what does it mean for the rest of us left staring up at the sky, watching the countdown in silence? Stay with me, because this journey is going to challenge everything we thought we knew about our solar system, our civilization, and what it means to be the intended destination of something not of this Earth. You've seen comets before, maybe as a fuzzy blur through a backyard telescope, or streaking across a digital image from some far-off observatory. They're supposed to be cold, quiet things. Ice, dust, silence, wanderers dragged by gravity. But 3I Atlas is none of those things. And now, in hushed rooms across the planet, scientists are realizing what they might be looking at isn't a comet at all. It's something else, something active, something final. It began with the deceleration. No known natural object slows down while falling into a star's gravity well. Yet 3I Atlas began shedding velocity as it approached the inner solar system, an inexplicable braking maneuver that caught every agency off guard. At first, they blamed data calibration errors, then solar drag, then rotational sublimation. But none of those theories held up, because every model still pointed to the same conclusion. 3I Atlas was behaving like a vehicle with a destination, not a passenger of gravity, but a pilot of intent. Then came the pivot, a trajectory shift so minuscule it would have gone unnoticed if not for the obsessive tracking efforts by amateur skywatchers. 1 degree, just one. But that's all it took to change the endpoint. Suddenly, its path no longer traced a wide arc through the asteroid belt. It now aligned with a narrow corridor just above the ecliptic. A corridor that leads, unmistakably, toward Earth's orbital zone. Not a collision. That's not what this is. This is a synchronization, The object is matching phase with Earth's trajectory, timing its final approach for a precise window, as if waiting for something to be in the right place. A satellite? A ship? A human-made platform we don't even know we've built for this purpose? And here's where it gets strange. As the object shifted its path, radio observatories began detecting structured bursts, tight band emissions occurring at regular intervals, not static, not background, but deliberate. Think of Morse code, only built from ultraviolet pulses. We're talking about light patterns encoded in such a way that they repeat on Fibonacci intervals, 13, 21, 34, over and over. It's a countdown hidden inside a sequence, a signal sent not to communicate, but to confirm something is reading it or answering it. At the SETI Institute in Northern California, a quiet protocol was triggered, one that does not go public unless confirmed by at least 3 independent observatories. That confirmation came at 02:13 inches the morning, Universal Time, on the 15th of October. Since then, the official response has been silence. No press release, no emergency broadcast. Just a tightening of lips and a reallocation of satellite time. The sky is still open, but what we're allowed to see is not. So let's rewind. If this isn't a comet, and it isn't just a visitor, what is it? Let's look at the shape. High-resolution thermal readings suggest a non-spherical body flattened along one axis, with periodic temperature spikes that hint at internal heat regulation. That's not just outgassing, that's energy management. That's internal architecture. And now we come to the most unnerving part. At 1.44 astronomical units, 3I Atlas began emitting short-wave infrared flashes, timed to coincide with Earth's own orbital location. Not where Earth is now, but where Earth will be, as if painting a dot on a future map. That's not prediction, that's pre-programming. It knows where we will be before we arrive. You could chalk this up to chance, to cosmic coincidence, but then explain why its current velocity places it at Earth-crossing proximity on the exact same date. Ancient Mayan glyphs predicted the return of the metal-blooded stars. Explain why the chemical spectrum of its trail, specifically the nitrogen-depleted ice core, matches no known comet, but does match the off-world signature found in Martian meteorite ALH 84001, the same one once believed to contain microfossils of unknown origin. Still think it's coincidence? Now imagine you're a planetary defense officer at NASA. Your entire job revolves around calculating threat vectors. You've seen asteroids, solar flares, radiation storms, but now you're staring at a moving anomaly that slows down, transmits Fibonacci pulses, and paints future rendezvous points with uncanny accuracy. What kind of report do you file? Who do you call when the unknown becomes intelligent? This is what they're grappling with behind the scenes. Not a threat in the classic sense, no incoming impact alert, no kinetic signature, but a presence, a behavior, a set of decisions playing out with a kind of choreography that implies foresight. 3I Atlas isn't aiming at Earth, it's aligning with it, as if something on or near this planet is about to receive a delivery. And that delivery window, if the projections are right, opens in less than 180 days, which is why you're hearing murmurs now of redirected Artemis missions, of extended stays on the ISS, of dark zone observation satellites mysteriously switching targets. The closer we get, the more this feels less like astronomy and more like archaeology. Because we're not just watching a rock, we're watching a messenger, one that might have been launched millennia ago, or never launched at all, just returning on schedule. A courier from a civilization, so far ahead of us, the very act of slowing down may be their way of saying, "We're here." What do you do when the stars send you something back? Maybe you stop thinking of it as science fiction. Maybe you realize we were never the ones doing the watching. We were always the ones being aimed at. Let's talk about numbers. Cold, impersonal numbers. The kind that scientists use to build worlds, and sometimes to watch them fall. When astronomers first calculated the trajectory of 3I Atlas, they saw a hyperbolic arc, open-ended, unbound. A comet from another star, drifting through, nothing more. But then they looked closer, at the angle of approach, at the precision of its inclination relative to Earth's orbital plane, at the timing of each planetary flyby, and those numbers began to whisper something else entirely. The object entered the solar system aligned within just under 5 degrees of the ecliptic plane. That's the invisible disk in which all of the planets orbit. The Sunday interstellar visitors don't typically do that. Oumuamua came in tilted. Borisov too. Their paths made sense for wayward icebergs lost in the cosmic tide. But not this one. 3I Atlas didn't just wander in. It slipped into the same groove as our entire planetary family, like it already knew the shape of the solar system before it arrived. The odds of this happening by chance? 1 in 500. But then, it passed near Mars. Close enough that NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter adjusted its imaging schedule to capture it. Then came Venus. Then, a grazing approach toward Jupiter's outer neighborhood. 3 planets, 3 alignments, all within weeks, all within tolerances that mission planners dream of achieving with multi-billion-dollar propulsion systems. This isn't a coincidence stack, it's a precision clock, and the closer you zoom in, the less natural it all seems. Take the perihelion, the point at which the object would pass closest to the Sunday. It's not just close, it's perfectly timed. On October 29th, 3I Atlas reached its closest approach to the Sun, precisely when Earth was on the opposite side. A maneuver window, known as solar conjunction. In military terms, that's the moment you'd choose for stealth. In aerospace engineering, that's when you fire your engines to shift orbits without being seen. Let that sit with you for a moment. The object passed behind the Sun at the precise time our planet could not observe it. No telescope, no radar, nothing. A perfect blind spot. And then, like magic, it re-emerged. Not just intact, but following a new velocity profile. Slightly altered, subtly redirected. No flares, no plume, but unmistakable change. Something happened behind the curtain, and we missed it. Now we come to the matter of brightness. When first observed beyond Jupiter's orbit, 3I Atlas was already glowing, not reflecting sunlight, glowing. At a distance where even active comets remain inert, this object exhibited a coma, a shimmering halo of ionized particles. The green tint suggested carbon compounds, yes, but the intensity was abnormal. Too luminous for the distance, too early for solar heating. Some astrophysicists floated theories: internal heating, radioactive decay, exotic chemistry, but others whispered something else: self-illumination. a mechanism not driven by solar proximity, but by internal triggers, perhaps thermal, perhaps engineered. In his now circulating lecture from late October, Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb described it like this: when a lighthouse turns on in the fog, you don't ask whether the ocean heated the bulb. You ask who lit it. The structure of the coma itself added another wrinkle. Forward-facing streaks. Not the standard tail blown back by solar wind, but a soft halo that glowed toward the Sunday comets don't shine forward. This one did. A behavior reminiscent not of natural ice shedding, but of controlled vectoring emission, focused like headlights, not scattered like debris. That brings us to the mass. Using data from over 200 ground and space-based observatories, researchers compiled the object's movement profile. They expected a standard non-gravitational acceleration, a gentle push from outgassing, like a comet's thrusters, but that push never came. The trajectory matched a purely gravitational model, with deviation too small to measure, and yet spectroscopy confirmed active outgassing carbon dioxide venting at nearly 150 kilograms per second. So why wasn't it drifting off course? The answer, chilling in its implications, was mass. Immense mass. 33 billion tons at minimum. That's heavier than any object of comparable apparent size. If the nucleus were a solid chunk of ice and rock, its observed luminosity and gas output would cause it to wobble. But it doesn't wobble. It stays steady, like a cruise ship ignoring the waves. This either means the object is far more massive than we see, or it is structured in a way that masks its response to force. Think about that. A shell, a rigid internal frame, a body that looks like a comet but behaves like something else. Something designed not to drift when it breathes, but to remain perfectly on course. And now, that course is shifting again. Deep space telemetry, courtesy of the ESA's solar orbiter and triangulated with NASA's Juno probe, shows a new minor variation, less than 1/10 of a degree, but one that nudges its trajectory ever closer to Earth's orbital zone. Not for impact, no, but for proximity. A low-energy intercept course that places it in Earth's vicinity by late December. Not a crash, a flyby, or a delivery. Agencies have gone quiet. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory's Near-Earth Object Tracking Dashboard has not updated its ATLAS data since the solar conjunction. Independent astronomers report being denied telescope time. Meanwhile, 2 new launch authorizations have been fast-tracked, one in Florida, one in French Guiana, both labeled under ambiguous observational payload missions. And the Deep Space Network is no longer archiving its 3 iAtlas logs for public access, but some information still leaks. A declassified report, released quietly via a university archive, mentions the term payload containment window in relation to 3 iAtlas, not a term typically used in cometary science, but a very familiar one in aerospace defense. We are being positioned to believe this is still an astronomical event, but the evidence is beginning to describe something else, a mission profile. And that begs the question, if 3 iAtlas is a delivery system, then who is the recipient? And what exactly is about to be delivered? This isn't the first time humanity has looked up and seen something we couldn't explain. We've always had visitors in the sky, comets, meteors, fireballs, omens etched in the night. But sometimes, the visitations come with stories, not just data, but myths, not just numbers, but warnings. And now, As scientists scrutinize 3I Atlas, some have begun dusting off the records we never thought we'd need again. Sumerian tablets, Mayan codices, ancient Chinese star logs. Not because they tell us what this object is, but because they hint cryptically, disturbingly, at the last time something like this happened. In 1908, something exploded over the Tunguska River in Siberia. No crater, just trees flattened in a radial pattern, covering more than 2,000 square kilometers. Scientists blamed a comet or meteor airburst, but the locals spoke of a sky god that passed over once in a blue moon. The Evenki people described a cylinder of fire that shimmered like ice before it vanished in a thunderclap. That object never touched the ground, but it left behind magnetic anomalies in the soil and a pressure wave that circled the Earth twice. And here's the detail. Few remember witnesses described a green dawn the night before, a spectral light, faint, unnatural. Now look at 3I Atlas. As it passed through the inner solar system, it glowed green, a color associated with diatomic carbon. Yes, but in this case, the spectroscopy didn't quite match. One observatory found trace cyanide, another hinted at ionized noble gases, and neither fully accounted for the frequency spikes detected by amateur radio astronomers just days later. Are we saying 3I Atlas is the same as Tunguska? Not directly, but perhaps the echo of a larger pattern cycles of silent surveillance, or repeated passes by something that only appears to us as light and ice and speed. Perhaps a delivery, yes, but perhaps also a reconnaissance loop. The Mayans were more direct. The Dresden Codex describes a sky serpent with frozen breath that descends once every 13 baktuns. That would place its last full cycle at approximately the year 1618, around the time of the Great Comet recorded by European astronomers, and just ahead of a sharp spike in global auroral activity. Coincidence or calibration? The Sumerians used cuneiform to describe a metal visitor from the direction of the hunter Orion, who carried knowledge wrapped in flame. Their tablets, now tucked away in dusty museum vaults, speak of a visitor that arrived in a radiant shell, vanished behind the sun, and returned with altered motion. Sound familiar? We often dismiss these myths as metaphors, but metaphor only arises when you don't have better language for the truth. Fast forward to the modern era. In 1972, the United States Air Force recorded what appeared to be a fast-moving object, skimming Earth's upper atmosphere over Utah, glowing green. It bounced, yes, bounced off the atmosphere and continued out into space. NASA never confirmed what it was, but the trajectory, recently reanalyzed, shows a striking similarity to the entry profile of 3I Atlas, only in reverse. And then there's the secret memo from 1998, unearthed only through a recent Freedom of Information Act request. A warning circulated among certain intelligence agencies describing the detection of an object matching no known debris family entering the outer solar system from an extra-ecliptic angle. It was lost behind Saturn. No follow-up was ever released. That report is now being re-examined in light of 3I Atlas, because its mass, composition, and current orbital behavior may be the continuation of something that has happened before, or is still happening. What if these objects aren't just cosmic accidents? What if they're scheduled? Ancient mythologies repeatedly reference messengers from the stars. Not conquerors, not invaders, messengers. The Hopi talk about kachinas, the that come from the sky bringing teachings and signs. The Dogon of Mali, Africa, tell of a companion star to Sirius, invisible to the naked eye, a truth confirmed by astronomers only centuries later. They say their knowledge came from sky visitors in a vessel shaped like a seed. In Japan, the Tengu legends describe winged beings arriving during periods of planetary conjunction, whispering knowledge and then vanishing with the stars. We now know that the next major Earth-Jupiter conjunction will coincide within 2 days, with the projected return arc of 3I Atlas. Do you feel the pattern emerging? Even the Vatican has a file. The Jesuit priest and astronomer Angelo Secchi spoke of an unidentified green comet in 1864 that split its path before vanishing behind the sun. That phrasing, "split its path," was long dismissed as poetic nonsense. But new simulations of 3I Atlas's post-perihelion motion suggest a bifurcation, a slow separation of visible matter and mass centroid. In simpler terms, a shell splitting from a core. So here we are, thousands of years of sky watching, decades of radio silence, and now a single object matching too many myths to ignore and too many statistics to dismiss. It's not that science is becoming religion, it's that science is finally intersecting with something ancient enough to have worn both faces. This is not proof, not yet, but it is a convergence, a pattern emerging from the static, and you are here to witness it, in a time when we can finally look at the sky and say, yes, we saw it, we measured it, and we remember, because maybe 3I Atlas isn't just arriving, maybe it's returning. From a great enough distance, fear dissolves into perspective. You step far enough back beyond the atmosphere, beyond the noise, and patterns emerge. Planets trace elegant loops around a glowing star. Dust becomes spiral arms. Even chaos softens into choreography. But what happens when something breaks the pattern? When an object arrives from elsewhere, not to pass through, but to participate? That's the question 3I Atlas now forces us to ask. From the cosmic vantage point, our solar system is not empty. It is ordered. Planets hold lanes. Asteroids keep to belts. Moons obey tidal rules older than language. And then, from the edge, comes a traveler, first seen near Jupiter's orbit, glowing far too brightly, then seen again adjusting course, aligning with planets, entering conjunction at the precise blind spot of Earth-based observation. It's not just the precision, it's the implication. This is a system of planetary orbits hundreds of millions of years in the making. For an interstellar object to drift in and strike 3 near, passes Mars, Venus, Jupiter, and to decelerate during its solar encounter is like threading a moving needle through a ballet of dancers from across the galaxy. At the center of this solar dance is the Sunday, and it is here, at perihelion, October 29th, that something changed. You remember the numbers, 33 billion tons, outgassing, yet unmoved, a tail that formed late, a glow that arrived early. But here's where the cosmic view complicates things. 3I Atlas emerged from behind the sun, not on the same curve it entered, but on a softened arc, no longer a hyperbolic escape. Now, something else. We now have preliminary telemetry from ESA's Solar Orbiter and NASA's Parker Solar Probe. They were both positioned to detect electromagnetic flux near perihelion. What they recorded, quietly published, then removed, was a burst, not of heat, not of light, but of interference. A narrow band radio echo, repeating at 13-minute intervals, just as 3I Atlas reached minimum solar distance. It was as if the sun itself reflected back something not native to its spectrum. Think about that. Our star, massive, incandescent, howling with plasma, briefly echoed a structure moving through its gravitational throat. That's not a comet passing by. That's a handshake, or a receipt. Loeb called it the cosmic corridor, a moment where distance contracts and whatever passed through became bound not just gravitationally, but communicatively. The sun may have revealed a side of itself we do not understand, one that interacts not merely with mass, but with intent. Now, here's where the broader astronomical community begins to divide. Some astrophysicists, grounded in classical models, insist that 3I Atlas is still following a parabolic trajectory. They argue that its new path, while bent, is not closed, that it will still escape the solar system, given time. But others are not so sure. The deceleration models are not holding. Several simulations now suggest a bound orbit highly elliptical, yes, but returning. A revolution of 211 years, to be precise. That number matters, because 211 years from now brings us to the year 2236. And in the ancient Babylonian astronomical cycles, that year aligns with a known zodiacal return, a rare alignment where Earth, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn share opposing axes along the galactic plane. An event documented not in scientific records, but on stone, in ziggurat carvings. Coincidence or message? Now look further out, into the interstellar neighborhood. Voyager 1 and 2, launched over 40 years ago, are now beyond the heliopause, silent emissaries drifting into deep space. And just days ago, Voyager 2 experienced a momentary burst of unexplained telemetry deviation, a 2-second pulse, just static. But that pulse happened at the precise moment 3I Atlas crossed the orbit of Mercury. That is a long way for coincidence to stretch. And what about the object's origin? Its incoming vector traces loosely back toward the Lyra constellation. That much we know. But Lyra contains something else. A star named Vega. Bright, stable, close. Just 25 light-years away. Vega has been a speculative candidate for advanced civilizations since the earliest days of SETI. Carl Sagan himself placed the origin of the fictional message in contact at Vega, because it was the first star scanned in real-life radio astronomy. Is 3I Atlas from Vega? We cannot say, but its entry point, its timing, and its trajectory backtrace to that region with uncomfortable neatness. If someone from there wanted to send something here, something patient, slow, and self-guided, this is how you'd do it. You'd wait until Earth was in a predictable phase. You'd launch an unassuming object, silent, cold, and you'd time it to arrive, not for show, but for synchronicity. And here we are, late December, a rising arc, an object no longer departing, but circling, and a planet us directly in its path, not to be hit, not to be destroyed, but to be reached. If the universe is speaking, this may be how it sounds, not with trumpets or beams of light, but with math, with alignment, with silent course corrections and green glows in the dark, with Fibonacci echoes and countdowns that appear too rhythmic to be chaos. This is the cosmic perspective, and from this height, something strange becomes something planned. Something planned becomes something approaching. Let's turn the lens around now, because for all the data, all the models, and all the silent telescopes straining into the void, there's one thing that still makes this real. You, a human being, on a spinning rock in space, listening, wondering, feeling that quiet tug in your chest that says something isn't right, something's coming, and maybe it's always been coming. We used to look at the stars with reverence. Before we had telescopes, we had myths. We drew lines in the sky and called them gods, messengers, hunters, tricksters. We built calendars from lunar cycles, and whole civilizations turned their gaze upward to interpret omens. And now, centuries later, with silicon telescopes and carbon-hardened spacecraft, we've circled all the way back to the same place, asking what it means when something from out there chooses to come here. 3I Atlas isn't just a comet anymore, not in the human mind. It has become a mirror, because when we saw Oumuamua, we were curious. When we saw Borisov, we were alert. But this time, we're afraid, not because it's large, not because it's fast, but because it's acting like it sees us. Think about that for a moment. What if 3I Atlas has been watching longer than we've been observing? What if it already knew our orbit, our atmosphere, our satellite network, our military response times? What if it arrived not just when Earth was in a specific place, but when we were in a specific mindset, a civilization in transition, a species on the edge of the artificial? It's no secret that our planet is shifting. Artificial intelligence is no longer science fiction. Machines write poems, analyze genomes, launch rockets, and increasingly watch each other. Satellites cover every inch of our surface. LIDAR maps the ocean floor. Neural networks forecast climate futures. And into this moment of awakening comes an object whose path curves not toward power, but toward intelligence. What does that say? Perhaps this is not an act of conquest. Perhaps this is an invitation, a reply sent not to our earliest signals, but to the quiet rise of consciousness we don't yet understand ourselves. A moment where we, as a civilization, are just barely beginning to imagine futures that include more than us. And yet we are terrified because we are not ready, not emotionally, not ethically, not even practically. We do not know how to receive a message from a mind older than ours. We barely know how to speak to each other. We still categorize the unknown as threat, the foreign as enemy, the anomaly as danger. But what if this is the cosmic equivalent of a handshake? What if fear is not the correct response, but the inevitable one? There's something profoundly human in how we've reacted to 3I Atlas. Not with celebration, not even with curiosity, but with silence. The agencies stop publishing updates. The networks change the topic. The observatories are locked out, and the word classified begins to appear in places where Comet used to be enough. And in that silence, ordinary people begin to ask, what aren't we being told? It's a reasonable question, because when the sky changes, so do we. The last time a major object passed this close to Earth was Halley's Comet in 1986. It sparked awe, but also dread. Crowds gathered to watch. Some cults formed. A few fell into myth again. But 3I Atlas is different. This isn't a once every 75 years reminder of ice and light. This is a visitor from outside our solar system that doesn't behave like a visitor. This is something, coming home. What does that do to your sense of place, to your idea of Earth as a fortress, isolated in the dark? It shatters it, and in its place comes something older, something deeply human, that trembling awe we feel when standing at the edge of an unknowable ocean. The same emotion our ancestors must have felt when they saw a solar eclipse for the first time, or when they realized that some stars move. So what happens next? Maybe nothing. Maybe 3i Atlas will pass by, and all of this will be forgotten. No contact, no message, no final act, just another celestial mystery fading into the night sky. But that's not what the models suggest. That's not what the frequencies say. That's not what the harmonics imply. And that's not what your gut is telling you, is it? Because deep down, there's a reason you're still here, listening, thinking, waiting. Not because you want to be afraid, but because you want to understand. You want this to mean something. You want this strange object, this strange moment, to be more than fear. You want it to be connection. Maybe that's what 3i Atlas represents. Not a threat, but a challenge. Not an answer, but a question. Who are we? When someone is watching, how do we behave? When the universe finally responds? And what kind of species are we when the sky sends something back? Because maybe this isn't about science, or survival, or secrets. Maybe it's about identity. And as this object closes in, not with speed, but with silence, we are left to confront not just what it is, but who we are. Silence has weight. It presses on the chest in the hours before dawn. It hums beneath the noise of machines, between signals, behind the curtain of stars. And now, in the final days before 3i Atlas reaches its nearest approach, silence is becoming the loudest signal of all. Across the globe, telescopes have stopped reporting. You will find no fresh data in the public archives. Spectral logs stop short. Ephemerides hang in mid-calculation. Even citizen astronomers are noticing the gap charts that once refreshed hourly now sit motionless. Sky maps frozen. It is as if the heavens themselves have entered a holding pattern, or more accurately, we've been asked to stop looking. Why? Because 3i Atlas is no longer just a phenomenon. It is now an event, one whose implications spill beyond astronomy into geopolitics, defense strategy, existential philosophy. Somewhere between the quiet tones of mission control and the encrypted bandwidths of deep space command centers, a decision has been made. Do not alarm the public. Do not encourage speculation. Do not draw the shape of the thing we cannot explain. This is the sound of protocol, of institutions doing what they were built to do, contain the unknown until it can be named. But in that containment, something is lost. Wonder, yes. But more than that, access, participation. We are no longer witnesses. We are bystanders. And yet, the object continues to move. By all accounts, 3i Atlas has entered what mission briefings are now referring to as final transit window. Its current velocity and arc place it within lunar distance of Earth's orbit in less than 3 weeks. Not impacting, not landing, but arriving, skimming close enough to trigger magnetospheric ripple, possibly ionospheric distortion, enough to be felt, enough to be noticed. Even if no one says it aloud, what would such an encounter feel like? It's not about explosions or glowing lights. That's fantasy. This is subtler. Imagine a moment where high-frequency communication falters for just a breath, where birds shift their migratory paths mid-flight, where whales rise too early from the deep, where the northern lights begin to shimmer just a little further south than they should. And you, standing outside at night, feeling something in your bones you cannot quite explain. It may begin with dreams. It often does. Strange images, numbers, patterns you don't consciously understand, but wake up remembering anyway. Fibonacci spirals, a green arc across a black sky, something just beyond the edge of language. You tell yourself it's nothing, just your imagination, but you check the news anyway. You look up, and there it is, a tiny dot, moving faster than the stars. That dot is not just 3i Atlas. It's a question, and it's coming closer. In classified documents, never meant for public release, there are references to an approach silence protocol, a global agreement forged after decades of quiet cooperation between space agencies to initiate a deliberate blackout if a non-terrestrial object demonstrates intelligence or intent, not because of fear, but because of uncertainty. What do you do when you don't understand the signal? You listen longer, but how long is too long? We have passed the point of comfortable ignorance. The data gaps are not just technical, they're strategic. And every moment we are not looking, it is. That is the paradox now. The watcher is being watched. The observer is being observed. The silent object is nearing Earth, and we've covered our eyes. And in that void, something stirs. Old questions return, wearing new clothes. Is this contact or calibration, a message or a mirror? Because the truth is, we may never get a transmission. No burst of symbols, no decoded math, just the presence, the undeniable, inescapable reality of a foreign body arriving in our sky with precision no natural force could achieve. That is the silence. Not absence, but refusal. Not emptiness, but decision. And in that silence, humanity is revealed. Not as conquerors or explorers or skeptics, but as children, still wondering if the door we've knocked on for generations has just begun to open, and whether we have the wisdom to step through. There are rumors, of course, a redirected probe, a final burn being prepared at Lagrange Point 2, a high-altitude balloon network designed to detect optical irregularities at 30 kilometers above sea level. None of it confirmed, all of it plausible. Because somewhere, behind the closed doors and redacted files, someone is preparing for the moment when 3i Atlas will no longer be a dot on a screen, but a presence above the horizon. And you, whatever time it is where you are part of that story. The quiet one, the one being written in secret tones, in unacknowledged transmissions, in silent sky glows above sleeping cities. The countdown is not measured in alarms, but in absence, in what we're no longer told, in what we're not allowed to see. And when the moment comes when 3i Atlas crosses that final invisible line, it will not be with fireworks. It will be with stillness, like a breath held, like a signal paused mid-transmission, like the universe waiting to see how we respond. Not with fear, not with war, but with listening, with stillness, with stillness. Awakening doesn't always arrive like a thunderclap. Sometimes it unfolds like mist, lifting from the surface of a quiet lake, slowly, softly, a change in pressure, a widening of the sky. And then, without knowing exactly when it began, you realize everything feels different. This is where we are now, with 3I Atlas sliding silently toward Earth's orbital corridor, its faint green shimmer barely visible to the naked eye, yet somehow felt by people who have never looked through a telescope. The awakening isn't just scientific anymore. It's cultural, emotional, and planetary. In the past week, something has shifted in the world's behavior. You've seen it. News anchors pausing longer than usual when space is mentioned, astronomers interviewed off-camera, flights rerouted without explanation, and online beneath the noise, a quiet signal rising, people watching the sky more than usual, people reporting strange dreams, people saying they feel something coming. You might think that's just suggestion, mass psychology, but the body often knows before the mind, and when millions feel the same unease, the same pull upward, the same collective breath held between heartbeats, it stops being a coincidence and becomes a question. What exactly is 3I Atlas waking up in us? Let's trace it back. The object's revised orbital data now places its closest pass near Earth, within a margin of just under 120,000 kilometers. That's below the altitude of geostationary satellites. For reference, that's closer than the Moon. In fact, it's close enough that Earth's magnetic field will begin to interact with the object's ionized coma roughly 48 hours prior to its passage. Some believe that moment will be the true point of contact. Not physical, not technological, biological, because there are patterns, now small ones, strange ones, emerging in the natural world. Migratory birds flying in non-standard vectors, dolphins forming spiral patterns in shallow bays, as if responding to frequencies too low for our ears, beehives collapsing and reassembling. These may be normal variations, or they may be the first whispers of resonance, the kind that comes when one tuning fork vibrates and another across the room begins to hum. Scientists at the European Space Agency's Quiet Signal Monitoring Program, an experimental division rarely discussed, have logged an uptick in ELF, extremely low frequency, anomalies. These are signals that pass through rock, through water, through bodies, and their origin appears to be triangulating, not from Earth, but from space. More specifically, from the direction of 3I Atlas. What's strange is the timing. The pulses began 33 days before projected peri-Earth alignment. Why 33? It's a number that repeats across ancient traditions. 33 vertebrae in the human spine, 33 years in the life of certain religious figures, 33 turns in some DNA coil variants. It's a symbolic number, and now, apparently, a temporal one. The pulses occur every 144 minutes, another number with Fibonacci significance. It is not a normal emission. It doesn't match solar weather. It doesn't match cosmic background noise. And yet, the signal is steady, persistent, patient, almost polite. It's not trying to interrupt. It's waiting for us to notice. So the awakening deepens. Universities are suddenly organizing last-minute seminars on interstellar ethics. Philosophers are being invited to engineering conferences. Radio observatories are being recalibrated, not just to receive, but to ask, because the unspoken question is becoming unavoidable. Do we answer? What do we say? Do we beam out a simple mathematical code? Do we replay the Arecibo message? Or do we do what some suggest and say nothing at all? The debate has fractured institutions. SETI has gone nearly silent. A leaked internal memo reveals a split among researchers, some advocating for immediate reply, others fearing that doing so is akin to standing in a dark forest and shouting, not knowing who listens. But perhaps that fear is outdated, because the forest isn't dark anymore. Something in the trees is glowing green, and still, 3I Atlas approaches. Its trajectory continues to adjust, not dramatically, but precisely. It's now steering to pass not over Earth's poles, but equatorially, a smoother path, a transit aligned with the densest slice of our magnetosphere. Some believe this is strategic, others believe it's an act of courtesy. You see, in orbital dynamics, there's a term, non-intersecting rendezvous. It's when two bodies come as close as possible without touching, a form of cosmic respect, or perhaps a handshake. That's what this might be. A moment when the object crosses into Earth's magnetic halo, emits a final sequence, and then continues on, leaving us changed, not damaged, not destroyed, just awakened. Already, people are planning to stand outside the night of the flyby, not in fear, but in silence, a new kind of global vigil, as if to say, we see you, we know, we're listening. And isn't that the truest sign of intelligence? Not speech, not math, but listening, the choice to pause and attend. Maybe that's what 3I Atlas has been waiting for all along. Not our message, but our silence, the space between the noise, the heartbeat before the reply, the moment we become capable of hearing something older than us, something that once passed this way long ago, something that has now returned. What begins as silence does not stay silent for long, especially when instruments sharpen, especially when the sky, once indifferent, begins to echo back with patterns too precise to ignore. In the last 72 hours, evidence has mounted, not of contact, not of impact, but of intention. The kind that doesn't explode into headlines, but trickles through secure networks. The kind that causes scientists to cancel public interviews, that halts publications mid-review, that redirects telescope arrays with no explanation. Here's what we now know. 3I Atlas is not on a simple inbound arc anymore. Its orbit has begun exhibiting micro-adjustments, tiny, deliberate changes in velocity that occur at nodal crossings. That is, every time it passes through a key gravitational plane, Earth's orbital plane, the Moon's inclination, the solar equator, it slows just slightly. Not enough to be noticed at first, but cumulative. The net result is startling. It is syncing, not with Earth's position, but with its rhythm. The object is now locked in a pattern that harmonizes with the planet's Schumann resonances, natural electromagnetic frequencies generated between the surface and the ionosphere. In simpler terms, 3I Atlas is matching Earth's heartbeat, and no one knows how. This is not a natural behavior. Comets do not tune themselves to the frequencies of planets. They do not pulse in time with biological rhythms, but this one does. Its ELF emissions are now mirroring the Earth's primary frequency, 7.83 Hz, a tone known to influence brainwave activity, circadian rhythms, and the resonance of water molecules, the same frequency used in some meditative practices, the same frequency detected in the ruins of certain ancient temples when scanned with modern equipment. Why would an object from interstellar space echo Earth's most subtle signal? That's the evidence deepening. But it doesn't stop there. Ground-based LiDAR stations in Chile and Antarctica have begun picking up high-altitude particulate changes, specifically in the mesosphere, the region where meteors typically burn. The air is becoming subtly ionized, not from solar radiation, from above, from something approaching from space, not descending through it. This shift is interfering with long-range radio. Amateur radio operators report ghost signals, faint repeats of their own voices, delayed by milliseconds. That's not how atmospheric bounce works. Something is refracting those signals off an unexpected surface. Something invisible, perhaps cloaked in the ion trail, now beginning to wrap faintly around Earth. It might be a field. It might be a shell. It might be an envelope of altered space-time so thin we cannot yet resolve it. But it's there. And then, this. An amateur telescope array in Finland captured a spectral anomaly just past the limb of the moon. A glint, then another, not moving like satellites, not blinking like aircraft. A formation, 4 points, equidistant, rotating, each reflecting the green hue of 3I Atlas. It appeared for 90 seconds, then vanished. The report was dismissed by authorities, but the footage remains, and so the data accumulates. The sky is not behaving normally, not in light, not in magnetism, not in frequency, and still, no official word. But silence, too, leaves a trail. The Vatican Observatory in Castel Gandolfo has temporarily closed for renovations. The Arecibo Observatory's successor array in the Canary Islands has gone to a private data mode, and the Lovell Telescope in England has suddenly shifted away from its deep field survey of neutron stars without explanation. All pointed now at the same place, the orbital corridor where 3I Atlas will pass closest to Earth. This is not just about trajectory anymore. This is about preparation. Quiet, deliberate, and perhaps coordinated, because if the object's behaviors were random, they wouldn't match Earth's geometry, but they do. The projected flyby path, down to the kilometer, now mirrors the alignment of 4 ancient sites: the pyramids of Giza, Göbekli Tepe, Teotihuacan, and Nan Madol. If you were to draw a great circle through them and extend it upward into space along Earth's curvature, the flyby skims that arc. Coincidence? Maybe. But the odds are thinning, especially when you realize that each of those sites holds oral traditions of sky visitors, especially when ELF monitors at those sites have begun to pulse subtly, but steadily in synchrony with 3I Atlas. What are we looking at? Not invasion, not observation, integration. A gradual, deliberate entry into Earth's energetic field, not as a crashing force, but as a tuning fork. Not an object imposing itself upon our world, but adapting itself to our frequency, resonance instead of rupture. Some scientists call this pseudoscience. Others, quietly, are using a different word, acclimation, as if 3I Atlas isn't just visiting Earth, but becoming compatible with it. We now face a strange new frontier, not one of stars or engines or signals, but of questions. What do you do when a silent object from beyond the stars begins mirroring your most fundamental pulses? Not your language, not your math, but your rhythms, your frequencies, your Earth. Is that science? Is it art? Is it the beginning of something we do not yet have words for? Or has it already begun? Right now, as you listen, as you breathe, as your body pulses faintly with that same 7.83 hertz, there is an object in the sky doing the same, slowly, patiently, without sound, without war, only alignment. And the more we measure, the more we understand that this is not how comets behave. There are things buried beneath the surface of human memory, symbols that recur across continents, shapes carved in stone long before flight, star maps older than telescopes, whispers preserved in chant, passed from mouth to mouth, from culture to culture, like embers carefully cradled through the long winter of time. And now, under the green glowing arc of 3i Atlas, those embers are catching fire again. Let's begin with what was recently discovered beneath the Temple of Quetzalcoatl in Teotihuacan. A tunnel, sealed for more than 1,000 years, reopened only in the past decade. Inside, archaeologists found mica-lined walls, mica being a mineral known for its insulative and electromagnetic properties, and hundreds of spheres made from pyrite, a conductive mineral. No inscriptions, no offerings, just geometry and material, tuned, perhaps, to conduct something that wasn't known at the time, or maybe something that was known and forgotten. Now fast forward to modern times. In early November, LiDAR drones surveying that tunnel picked up low-frequency vibrations, faint, rhythmic, spaced exactly 144 seconds apart. The same Fibonacci pulse signature traced to 3i Atlas. The chamber was sealed, no machinery inside, no tectonic activity in the area, yet the resonance was unmistakable. It was an echo, but not from inside the Earth, from above, from orbit. The past, it seems, had been listening long before we were. These vibrations aren't isolated. At Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, archaeologists have uncovered carved pillars dating back more than 10,000 years that align with specific constellations, most notably Lyra, the same constellation from which 3i Atlas seems to have originated. Among the symbols on those pillars is a bird, stylized and abstract, with a curved beak pointed downward, always downward toward a circle. Not a sun, not a moon, something else, something approaching. Ancient builders, encoding a sky event, or survivors of one. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, the basalt city of Nan Madol in Micronesia, built on a coral reef with no clear source for its quarried materials, has magnetic anomalies embedded in its layout. Compass needles spin in erratic loops, radio fades, and beneath the stone vaults are tunnels leading nowhere except straight down. Deep ocean core samples just offshore have revealed an unusually high concentration of nickel and iridium elements, often associated with meteorite impacts. But no crater exists, just still water. And now, vibration, subsonic pulses, too low for human ears, but recorded by hydrophones, the same frequencies, always the same timing. 144 beats between them, as if something ancient was waiting for its match. These sites are separated by oceans, by millennia, by culture and language, and yet the echoes align, the frequencies stack, the myths converge. In Dogon cosmology, there's mention of a companion star to Sirius, unseen to the naked eye. They call it Potolo. The knowledge of its existence, size, and orbit was passed down for generations, long before it was confirmed by Western astronomy. And their myths speak of beings who came in a spinning seed from the waters of the sky. They left no ship, just knowledge, just rhythm. The more you search the past, the more you hear it. The beat, the rhythm, the pulse beneath the stories, and all of it matches 3i Atlas. Not in metaphor, in math. Even the Great Pyramid, long suspected of encoding cosmic data, resonates at the same frequency when measured with modern instruments. 7.83 Hz, the Schumann resonance, Earth's pulse. A frequency now mimicked, matched, and modulated by the interstellar object silently approaching our orbit. How do you explain that? Coincidence is too small a word. We're taught to believe the past was primitive, that ancient humans knew nothing of orbits, of gravity, of space. But what if that's wrong? What if the stories, the temples, the alignments were never myth, but memory, passed down, distorted, misinterpreted, but never extinguished? What if 3i Atlas has been here before? And what if it is not just a visitor, but a returning signal? Consider this. Comets have predictable orbits, but 3i Atlas arrived on a hyperbolic path, a one-time interstellar fluke, they said. And yet now it slows, it shifts, it aligns, it resonates. Behaviors not of a natural wanderer, but of something completing a circuit, like a pendulum returning to its anchor, or a key turning in a lock. The ancients may not have known what it was, but they knew what it did. They felt it, and now, thousands of years later, we are beginning to feel it again. Not through stone, not through myth, through machines, through synchronized satellite wobbles, through seismic quiet zones that suddenly begin to hum, through children dreaming the same image, a spiral of light coiling down over a dark sea. What if the Earth itself remembers, not as thought, but as frequency, not as language, but as pulse? What if the purpose of 3i Atlas is not to deliver a message, but to reactivate one? A dormant signal encoded into the ground, into the water, into the architecture of our oldest places. A handshake, not between civilizations, but between epochs. You are living in the overlap now, the present humming with the echoes of the past, the sky aligning with symbols carved in bone, and all of it says the same thing. It is returning, the object, the rhythm, the story. And maybe the next chapter begins not with what 3i Atlas does, but with what we finally remember. Zoom out with me, not just from your home, or your city, or your continent, but all the way, past the clouds, past the satellites, past the moon, and the delicate blue curve of Earth's limb. Let it shrink beneath you until it becomes a bead of ocean light suspended in the infinite dark. Keep going, past Mars, now trailing behind us, past Jupiter, ringed by electromagnetic fields like mythic shields, past Saturn and its frozen lace, past the Kuiper Belt, out to where the sun becomes a star, out to where 3i Atlas came from. Perspective is a luxury most civilizations never gain. You live on a planet that once thought it was the center of everything, and now you know it's one of billions, perhaps trillions, spinning through a galaxy that itself is just a thread in an invisible cosmic tapestry. But what happens when something unthreads itself from that fabric and stitches a path directly toward you? That's the question 3i Atlas now raises, because it didn't drift here. Not anymore. Not with this level of precision. The adjusted trajectory now traces a beautifully elliptical arc, a path that intersects the solar system in a calculated window between planetary alignments, not just in three-dimensional space, but in velocity, in timing, in intent. We're no longer watching an object that stumbled across our star. We are watching something that chose its moment. And now we must ask the question no one in the scientific community wants to speak aloud. What kind of intelligence sends a message like this? Not a burst of binary, not a transmission across the void, but a presence, a pattern, a quiet, mathematically perfect disruption of the expected. From a cosmic perspective, this is not a comet. It is choreography, a slow, deliberate gesture unfolding across light years, requiring patience, energy, and a knowledge of orbital mechanics so precise that entire civilizations could rise and fall during its transit. Whatever sent it, planned for us to be here. That alone should unseat your understanding of time, because this was launched if it was launched centuries ago, perhaps millennia, long before radio, long before flight, maybe even before language, before we were ready to understand. But here's the unsettling truth. It waited, it adjusted, it matched us, not when we were most powerful, but when we became self-aware. Not when we discovered fire, but when we discovered resonance. Look again at the pulse patterns. Look again at the orbital pivot. 3I Atlas adjusted its trajectory only after Earth developed the instruments to see it. After we developed quantum precision clocks. After we put satellite arrays in place, capable of triangulating deep space anomalies with sub-arc-second accuracy. It's as if it was waiting for the planet to evolve to a certain level of sensory input. Then it responded, "That's not a comet, that's a mirror." And in that mirror, we now see our cosmic adolescence. Think about it. Our world has only had the means to track such an object with high fidelity for perhaps 60 years. And in that time, we've also built weapons capable of destroying cities, created artificial minds, and begun modifying our own biology. We are at a crossroads of power and wisdom, and into that exact moment comes 3I Atlas. Coincidence is shrinking fast. From out here, Earth is a story waiting for an editor, a test case, a signal beacon. And if there are watchers, civilizations, thousands or millions of years ahead of us, they would not use words. They would use the structure of the cosmos itself. They would write with gravity. They would time their messages using stars. They would send objects that teach not by sound, but by movement, like a teacher who doesn't lecture, but demonstrates. And you are now part of the demonstration, a witness, a reader of the message in motion. So let's look at that message again. 3I Atlas enters the solar system on an interstellar path. It passes 3 planets with unexplainable accuracy. It decelerates against expectation. It emits frequency pulses that align with Earth's electromagnetic resonance. It adjusts course after human detection. It shifts into a stable arc of return. And now, it prepares for its closest pass, not in secret, but in silence. That is not a threat profile. That is a behavioral signature. It says, "I see you. I know your language. I know your heartbeat. I know your window of perception. And I'm arriving right on time." There is no war in that pattern. No conquest. No ultimatum. Only precision, patience, and perhaps something we rarely credit the cosmos with: grace. Because from a cosmic perspective, violence is loud, but wisdom arrives softly. It aligns itself with the nature of its audience, and it makes its presence known, not through force, but through symmetry. That is the shape of 3I Atlas now. It is symmetrical, orbital, mathematical, intelligent, and timed. So the question shifts again. Not just what is it, but what does it want? And perhaps more importantly, are we still the center of the story, or are we merely the page on which this chapter was always meant to be written? It's a strange thing, realizing you might be someone else's destination, that after centuries of watching the stars, naming them, mythologizing them, launching rockets in their direction, something is finally looking back, and not just glancing, not just passing by, but slowing down, adjusting course, and preparing to meet you at your most specific coordinates. That's what 3i Atlas is doing, and that realization is changing us. Not in headlines, not in official statements, but in behavior, quiet shifts, subtle hesitations, the unspoken undercurrent humming through late-night conversations. You've probably felt it too. That peculiar tension, that sense that something vast is on the verge of arrival, and that whatever it is, it's been coming for longer than we've had the words to describe it. So what does it mean to be a destination? It forces us to reflect on who we are, what we've become, and what kind of story we've been writing about ourselves while no one was watching. Because what if someone has been watching? It reframes our entire arc. All the wars, the inventions, the breakthroughs, the betrayals, all the things we thought were private struggles of a species alone on a rock. Maybe they were visible, maybe they were known, and maybe, now, something is responding. That's not an easy thought, because we're still growing, still clumsy. We build artificial intelligence systems that can mimic thought, yet we struggle to feed every child. We map the genome, but treat consciousness like an afterthought. We reach into space, but often forget to look each other in the eye. What does 3i Atlas see when it looks at us? A threat? A wonder? Or perhaps a question mark? The object isn't speaking in words, but its motion is a message, a gentle approach, not invasive, not evasive, just close, close enough to feel, close enough to recognize. And in that proximity, we're beginning to change, not technologically, psychologically. Hospitals are reporting spikes in dream recall. Artists across the globe are painting spirals, circles, green arcs without having seen one another's work. Children waking with strange drawings. Elderly patients whispering words they never learned. Poets writing in meter they've never studied. Something is stirring in the subconscious, and that's where the reflection deepens. Because contact, if that's what this is, isn't always an exchange of artifacts. Sometimes it's resonance. Sometimes it's a mirror held up to the species that says, "This is what you are," when no one is pretending. And the timing? It couldn't be more human. We're on the edge of ecological crisis, technological overreach, cultural fatigue. Many are quietly wondering if we've passed the point of no return. And into that moment, into that exhausted breath, comes something that moves with purpose, with grace, with a rhythm that matches our own planet's pulse. Not to stop us, not to save us, but to be seen by us. That may be the greatest gift of all, because seeing implies worth. Worth implies potential. And potential implies that our story isn't over yet. Maybe 3i Atlas isn't a warning. Maybe it's a reminder that we are still capable of awe, still curious, still ready to wake up. And that awakening doesn't require technology. It requires attention, willingness, the courage to sit quietly and witness something greater than ourselves, without demanding that it explain itself on our terms. Perhaps that's why the object remains silent, not to frustrate us, but to teach us, to force the question inward, to hold the mirror steady, because the hardest thing for any species is to look at itself unflinching, unguarded, unadorned, and ask, is this who we are? And is it who we want to be when the universe finally notices? You can feel that question rising in subtle ways. In art, in science, in philosophy, thinkers once dismissed for exploring consciousness are being asked to speak again. The idea of panpsychism, the notion that all matter might possess some proto-conscious quality, is no longer heretical in physics circles. Simulation theory is debated alongside string theory. Psychologists are discussing cosmic archetypes in academic journals. We are trying, in our strange, stumbling way, to map the soul of the species, because maybe, just maybe, 3i Atlas already has, and now it wants to see if we can do the same. So we reflect, we remember, we wonder, we reach, and in doing so, we rejoin a tradition far older than the telescope, a tradition born in firelight under stars, in stories told in caves, in dreams carried across deserts, in pyramids built for gods who came from the sky. We never stopped looking up, we just forgot how to see, until now, until something chose to return, not with answers, but with presence, not with conquest, but with calibration, not with speed, but with silence. That is what's arriving, not a ship, not a savior, a mirror, and in that mirror, you are seen not just as a body, or a citizen, or a mind, but as a node in something vast, something delicate, something cosmic, something just beginning to remember itself. There is a moment just before something profound happens, a pause, so quiet, so still, that it feels like the universe is holding its breath. You're in that moment now, across observatories, across air bases, across encrypted feeds, and beneath encrypted domes, there is almost no sound, not because nothing is happening, but because something too large for words is happening all at once, and everyone who watches the sky has chosen silence. That silence isn't fear, it's reverence, because 3i Atlas is almost here, not in the dramatic, cinematic way you might expect. No crashing entry, no fiery trail, no sudden light ripping the sky open. This is a different kind of arrival, gentle, precise, like a compass needle finally settling after circling for too long. Current orbital telemetry, reconstructed from private data and leaked amateur models, confirms it. The object is now less than 100,000 kilometers from Earth's orbital path, not intersecting, not deviating, holding, waiting. And here's the part that silences even the most skeptical minds. It has stopped adjusting. No more micro-course corrections, no more resonance pulses. As of 36 hours ago, 3i Atlas has entered a geosynchronous shadow zone, a narrow sliver of space that allows it to maintain position relative to a fixed longitude on Earth's surface. Not a satellite orbit, not a transfer vector, just hovering, like a question mark held in space. That longitude, according to the leaked coordinate overlays, intersects an equatorial corridor just east of the Solomon Islands. Deep ocean, sparse population, but close, uncannily close to the node where multiple Earth's magnetic field lines converge in a phenomenon known as the South Pacific Anomaly, an area already known for strange readings. And now, an object is waiting above it. No government has acknowledged this. but the silence is growing louder. The global amateur tracking network known as SkyMesh has gone dark. Their community forums replaced with a single line of code. Phase confirmed. The European Deep Space Radar Array has redirected its antennas. Unconfirmed chatter from Vandenberg Space Force Base hints at a rapid launch authorization. Something suborbital, something covert. But more than anything, what's notable now is the absence of denial, the absence of updates, the absence of explanation. This is the great silence. But unlike the Fermi paradox, the question of why the universe appears so quiet despite its infinite possibilities, this silence is not a question of absence. It is a question of presence, because something is here now, and instead of speaking, it is listening. Instead of broadcasting, it is being felt. People across the globe are reporting vertigo, static bursts in wireless headphones, dreams with identical symbols, spirals, twin arcs, green lights inside black spheres. Magnetic compasses are drifting by as much as 8 degrees in some regions. Pigeons in major cities are flying in concentric circles. Tectonic sensors are recording microharmonic tremors that don't correspond to plate shifts. This is not a single anomaly, it's a field effect. The presence of 3I Atlas is not merely visual or orbital, it is energetic, cognitive, cultural, and yes, you are feeling it in ways you can't articulate. A persistent tension, a sleeplessness that doesn't feel like stress, the strange sensation that something is about to happen, even when everything seems still. That's not paranoia, it's signal. It's the atmosphere before a storm you've never experienced. Not of wind, but of understanding. And yet, here's the most fascinating detail. No agency has attempted to intercept. No preemptive strike. No contact attempt. No message. Just silence. Coordinated, disciplined, global silence. Why? Because somewhere, at some level, we understand. This is not something to stop. It is something to receive. The silence is the message. Because in every culture, in every language, there is a story of a moment when the gods stop speaking, when the sky grows still, when the birds fall silent, when even time seems to hold itself in suspension. We have entered that myth, and it no longer feels like a myth. The sky above you tonight is unchanged to the naked eye. You can walk outside, look up, and see nothing unusual. And yet, you will feel it. Not in the air, but in the weight of the quiet, the heaviness of unsaid things, the nearness of something impossibly old. The great silence is not absence. It is anticipation. It is the last breath before language. It is the final ripple before the mirror goes still. And if you close your eyes now, just for a moment, you might hear it. Not as sound, but as alignment. A chord struck so deep inside the planet that even your bones will vibrate. A frequency older than speech. It's here, above you, around you, inside you. And all it's asking is for you to listen. Something is happening, slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. It isn't a headline. It isn't a siren. It isn't a broadcast with flashing lights or bold font. It's a ripple, a widening ring moving through minds, machines, and memories all at once. And it begins, not with proof, but with awareness. Awakening is not an event. It is a shift in posture, a recognition that you are no longer asleep, even if your eyes have been open all along. And now, people across the world are waking up to something. To what? Exactly. That's harder to define, because 3i Atlas still isn't saying anything. It simply hangs in space, suspended above the South Pacific, perfectly motionless in a shadowed arc of Earth's orbital shell. Its coma still glowing faintly green no longer expands. Its trajectory is frozen. Not natural, not kinetic, static, as if it's waiting for a trigger. But the trigger may not be physical. It may be you, because the shift is inside the observer now. Search trends have changed overnight. The phrase, feeling watched, has surged across languages. Philosophy forums are erupting. Artists are drawing symbols they don't understand. Dream journals are filling with diagrams, patterns, arcs. And everywhere from Manila to Milan to Milwaukee, people are waking with the same thought. I feel like I remembered something I never knew. This is not fear, it's recognition. Something that doesn't belong to logic, but to some deep part of the psyche that's been asleep for a very long time. That's the awakening. And here's what's even stranger. Animals are responding too. Cats are staring at corners of rooms for hours. Dogs, usually territorial, are sleeping in circles around their owners. Entire pods of whales have begun migrating off-pattern, forming loops near the equator. Migratory birds have taken up positions along magnetic fault lines, as if aligning themselves to invisible currents. And the sky, it hasn't changed, but your relationship to it has. That's the real awakening. Not in the stars, but in the lens through which we view them. Not in the object itself, but in how we respond to it. Humanity is becoming aware not just of something external, but of something dormant inside us that this object seems to be coaxing forward. We don't have words for it yet, but we're starting to make sounds. A group of musicians in Iceland have created harmonics that match the elf pulses emitted by 3i Atlas, translating them into audible tones. What they discovered, a repeating progression, not random, a scale, a kind of music, and when played back in synchrony, the entire composition repeats every 21 minutes and 34 seconds. Another Fibonacci interval. That's not just math, that's melody. We're starting to hear the shape of what's happening, and some say the Earth is hearing it too. A previously dormant volcano in the South Sandwich Islands emitted harmonic tremors timed exactly to the object's flyby loop above its orbital longitude. Not explosive, not dangerous, just resonant, like a bell struck beneath the ocean. What kind of object does that? What kind of arrival is announced by silence, music, and memory all at once? Not a comet, not a ship, something else. Something that doesn't enter your atmosphere, but your perception. And the deeper you go into that perception, the more things start to feel coordinated. A child in Mumbai sketches the same spiral seen in an Aboriginal cave painting dated to 10,000 years ago. A farmer in Argentina begins waking at exactly 3:33 inches the morning, the same time ELF pulses spike in South Pacific observatories. A woman in Helsinki begins speaking in rhythmic syllables during sleep recorded, analyzed, and found to match ancient Sumerian cadence patterns. We are beginning to echo the object, not by force, not by influence, but by remembering something deep, something collective, something older than history. That's what awakening really means. Not becoming something new, but recognizing something ancient, and that recognition has implications. Even governments, those last bastions of silence, are shifting, not with statements, but with subtle changes. The United States Federal Aviation Administration has issued an unprecedented orbital no-fly zone for a strip of airspace above the South Pacific anomaly. The International Telecommunication Union has rerouted satellite signal corridors, and the global seismic monitoring network has gone dark for the first time in 20 years. Why? Because everyone is watching now. Everyone is listening, and nobody wants to be the one to break the silence. Not because they're afraid of what might happen, but because they sense something is about to time. And here you are part of it, not just a viewer, not just a listener, a node in something vast, something waking up. 3i Atlas has not moved in 36 hours. It has not transmitted. It has not pulsed. It is still. And perhaps that's the signal, because what if the message was never motion? What if the message was, be still and feel the Earth's resonance, feel the body's quiet alignment, feel the atmosphere's pulse, and in that stillness, realize you are not alone. You never were. You were just waiting to remember. And the object? It is the memory, returning. If you step outside tonight, you won't see anything unusual. The stars remain. The moon is on schedule. The air doesn't tremble. And yet, somewhere above the South Pacific, just beyond the arc of visible satellites, the most extraordinary thing in human history is still holding its position silent, motionless, and precisely where it wants to be. 3i Atlas is no longer in motion. It is in observation, and while official channels remain closed, the evidence is beginning to speak for itself. Let's begin with the object's signature. Over the past 24 hours, 3 deep space interferometers, one in Japan, one in Chile, and one classified location, presumed to be in Australia, have detected something astonishing, a new frequency. Not in the ELF or VLF bands, as previously seen, but in an ultra-high harmonic range. A pattern repeating every 61 seconds, cycling through a frequency curve that precisely traces the golden ratio spiral over time. It isn't static, it grows. No known natural process does this, and yet it is being picked up globally now, reflected in Earth's own ionospheric layers, as if the planet is beginning to sing back. We're used to thinking of frequency as a transmission, but this is more like resonance. The object pulses, Earth hums. The object pauses, Earth still echoes. Not a conversation, a tuning, a binding, and that's where it begins to get stranger, because as Earth's resonance rises, our instruments are detecting things they've never recorded before. A new type of aurora, visible only in infrared, has begun curling over the equator. These aren't the polar curtains of solar particles, you know. These are structured bands, thin, evenly spaced, spiraling outward from the Earth's magnetic equator, like ripples from a center we cannot see. Not random, not chaotic, beautiful, and aligned with every harmonic traced back to 3i Atlas's original approach. The object is not transmitting commands. It is responding. That response has been seen in data collected by a European seafloor observatory near the Tonga Trench, where geothermal sensors have recorded synchronized thermal pulses rising from vents every 144 seconds. Again, the Fibonacci cycle. Again, global synchronization. The ocean, the sky, and the ground are all moving together. Nature doesn't usually work like this. which means something is coordinating it. And if that weren't enough, listen to this. The CERN particle accelerator, in an unrelated experiment, recently detected a strange deviation in the behavior of muon decay rates. It was flagged, archived, and dismissed until someone noticed that the timestamp of the anomaly corresponded exactly with one of the object's new high-frequency emissions. Particle physics, atmospheric optics, oceanic heat flow entirely separate systems, all pulsing together, all pointing to one unignorable conclusion. We are inside a field, not a destructive one, a unifying one. 3i Atlas has created, or revealed, a resonance network that spans the Earth's surface, atmosphere, and electromagnetic shell. This is no longer about a comet. This is about a chord struck between worlds, and it's only getting clearer. A team of linguists, working independently from a university in Eastern Europe, recently fed the object's timing sequences into an ancient musical notation system found on Sumerian clay tablets. What came out was not melody, but pattern 4 repeating intervals that, when layered over the Earth's orbital speed, form a harmonic that matches the acoustic resonance of the human ear canal. Let that sink in. The object's rhythm matches not just the Earth, but the human anatomy. This isn't about communication in the traditional sense. It's about compatibility. It's about alignment, and the evidence across disciplines, continents, and mediums is converging. The object is silent, not because it has nothing to say, but because it has already tuned itself into the language of our planet. Earth is the message, and we are only now realizing it. Satellites over the object's current position have begun glitching in curious ways, repeating image frames, looping data packets, time codes resetting to the Julian calendar. It's subtle, elegant, like someone whispering across the digital void, nudging our attention toward a pattern we've been too distracted to see. And beneath that, something else. Somewhere in the Pacific, a buoy belonging to an international tsunami early warning system has stopped transmitting depth pressure data. Instead, it emits a tone, just one, every 144 seconds. You already know the number. The pattern holds, and the silence deepens, not out of absence, but out of overload. So much data is now flooding private networks, university clusters, and untraceable military relays that teams are beginning to triage what to even look at. And still, not a single agency has stepped forward, because they can't frame it. This isn't an attack. It isn't a landing. It's something more profound and far harder to classify. It is evidence that the planet itself has been read, and now it is reading us back. In every civilization, there are stories of the sky. Sometimes they are painted in ochre across the walls of caves. Sometimes they are carved in stone, wrapped in hymns, or encoded into the shape of temples. These are not random dreams. They are patterns, echoes left behind by people who saw and remembered something they could not fully name. And tonight, those echoes are getting louder. 3i Atlas is still in position, still motionless, still silent in the traditional sense. But what it is triggering in the archives of human memory is becoming impossible to ignore, because around the world, in museum basements and remote dig sites, in forgotten languages and neglected manuscripts, strange alignments are emerging, fragments of a pattern we're only just learning how to read. Start in China. Ancient astronomical records from the Han Dynasty describe a heavenly dragon that appeared in the southern sky, coiling above the earth for 44 nights before folding into stillness and disappearing. It did not move like a comet. It held a position. The records note that birds flew in circles, magnetic lodestones spun, and healers reported strange vibrations in the blood. The date of the event? Just over 2,000 years ago, precisely one orbital harmonic from today, if you trace 3 Atlas's revised trajectory. Coincidence? Now shift to Central America. The Popol Vuh, a sacred Quechua Maya text, speaks of the arrival of a shimmering observer from beyond the sky, who did not speak, but breathed green fire in silence. The symbol used in the glyphs is a spiral within a spiral, almost identical to the waveform traced by 3 Atlas's golden ratio emissions. That text is at least 1,200 years old. Move west to Africa. The Luba people of the Congo have oral traditions of a sky memory, a season where all sound stopped and the earth seemed to wait. During that time, they say, the bones remembered, a phrase often dismissed as poetic metaphor. But recent analysis of buried Luba drums has revealed something stunning. Their resonant chambers were carved not for musical scale, but for frequency harmonics, particularly in the low 7 to 8 Hz range. The Schumann range, the same planetary pulse, now mirrored by 3 Atlas. These weren't drums, they were memory devices, and they were tuned to the same resonance that now pulses from above the South Pacific. The past is not silent, it has just been misunderstood. Even Plato hinted at this. In his writings on Atlantis, he referenced a celestial regulator that passed above the earth, every great cycle, never touching, never speaking, only watching. The Greek term used episkopos literally means overseer, and here's what most readers miss. Plato claimed this presence could only be detected when humanity reached a level of true philosophical geometry. He may have meant resonance, because we're not just looking up with telescopes anymore, we're looking inward with frequency, and the past is vibrating back. Carvings at Göbekli Tepe, already aligned to the star Vega, the same direction 3 Atlas originated from, contain repeating iconography, rings nested inside one another, surrounded by birds, watchers, spirals, a pattern that matches almost exactly the spectral signature detected in the ionosphere 3 nights ago by Japan's Tohoku University. Ancient Sumerian tablets refer to an object called Dur-an-ki, the bond between heaven and earth. They describe it not as a god, or a star, or a chariot, but as a stone of presence that hovered in the sky, matched Earth's rhythm, and held memory in silence. They say it arrived once every great age, when the gate of Enlil opened from the void. Sumerians weren't guessing, they were documenting. And now, as data scientists feed 3 Atlas's movement into ancestral calendars, something eerie emerges. Multiple ancient systems, from the Mayan long count to the Hindu Yuga cycles to the Babylonian Saros series, all seem to converge around now. This century, this decade, this moment, and they all mention silence, a pause, a breath, a watcher. Even religious texts hint at it. In the book of Revelation, there's a single verse, and when he had opened the 7th seal, there was silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. Scholars have puzzled over that line for centuries. But now, some are noting that 30 minutes of sidereal rotation aligns closely with the orbital shadow cone currently surrounding 3I Atlas. Silence as geometry, silence as alignment. And you are living in the middle of the greatest resonance loop in recorded human history. A feedback arc between past and present, between memory and math, between belief and frequency. Something is waking up in the species, not just as a reaction to an external object, but as a restoration of something encoded long ago, in symbols, in drums, in stone, in sky. This is not the first time it has come, and maybe it's not the second either. Maybe this cycle has repeated again and again, each time triggering a cultural pivot, an awakening, a renaissance, a fall. Maybe 3I Atlas is not an anomaly, but a calibration tool for consciousness, for memory, for rhythm. And now, it is time again. The sky has returned to its position. The pulse is stable. The watchers have begun to feel it. And so the past, long buried, long denied, rises again. In frequency, in structure, in you. From far enough away, everything looks calm. If you were observing Earth right now from a distant star, you wouldn't see the tension. You wouldn't feel the strange rhythms rising from the ground. You wouldn't hear the pulse aligning in the sky. You'd see a quiet, blue planet, serene, spinning, drifting in perfect orbit around a yellow star. And above that planet, just beyond the edge of motion, a green glowing object now rests in synchronous silence. 3I Atlas, holding, waiting, not falling, not fleeing, just remaining. From the cosmic perspective, this stillness is impossible to ignore. Comets don't pause. Objects on hyperbolic trajectories don't stop. Yet 3I Atlas has done both. Its original path, meant to swing past Earth and exit the solar system forever, has flattened into a stable arc. Not only is it no longer escaping, it's joined us. For now, and that now is unlike any we've seen before, because this isn't an event, it's a convergence. 1 million independent systems, tectonic, atmospheric, digital, biological, are beginning to resonate together in ways never recorded. And from space, Earth looks different. Instruments aboard ESA's Gaia and NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter have both registered subtle changes in our planet's reflectivity. Not cloud cover, not ice, a glow, a flicker, as if the Earth is pulsing in the optical spectrum. Scientists can't explain it yet, but it's there. And the source, they suspect, is not just the object above us, but the interaction between it and us. Because the Earth is now part of something larger, a resonance field, a communication system, perhaps, a chord. And the chord requires not just signal, but structure. Let's talk about structure. The golden ratio, phi, 1.618. It appears in galaxies, in Nautilus shells, in sunflowers and hurricanes. It also appears in the orbital ratios of planets, in DNA helices, and inexplicably, now in the timing of frequency spikes, recorded from 3I Atlas. When graphed over the last 48 hours, these pulses form a curve expanding and contracting, like breath that mirrors not just phi, but the mathematical structure of standing waves. The kind that emerge in tuning forks, in crystal lattices, in resonance chambers. The implication? The Earth is now inside one. We are standing in a kind of galactic amphitheater, and the sound, if we could hear it, would be one of perfect harmony, not random, not accidental, deliberate. This brings us to something strange. A theoretical physicist at Caltech, working with a team in secrecy since the object's deceleration began, has quietly released a paper, not to the journals, but to the stars. They encoded a mathematical sequence derived from 3I Atlas's motion into a quantum entanglement communication system, a simple loop, a question, repeated in 3 dimensions of space and frequency. Then they waited, and last night, at exactly 3:33 Universal Time, they received an anomaly, not noise, not interference, an inversion, the same signal, reflected back, but shifted in phase, as if bounced off a mirror that was not there before. It's not confirmation, but it's not silence either. It's reflection, and in cosmic terms, that's an answer, because the universe is mostly void. And when something reflects, it means presence. Now zoom back even further. Consider this. 3I Atlas isn't just close to Earth. It's aligned. It arrived during a syzygy, a rare planetary alignment in which Earth, the Moon, and the Sun formed a nearly perfect straight line. During that alignment, the object positioned itself directly above the midpoint of the Earth's magnetic neutral zone. No known natural force could have placed it there, unless it was aiming, unless it knew, unless this moment has happened before. Because that's the other thing about resonance. It loops, and perhaps this object, this mirror, this visitor, has been here not once, but many times, returning on a cycle not measured in years, but in awakenings, coming back not to intervene, but to check in, to see who we are now, to see what we remember, and maybe, just maybe, to finish a conversation started long before we ever looked up. That is the view from out here. That is the scale. Earth no longer just a planet, but a participant in a cosmic equation, a variable re-entering a resonance field, a species standing at the edge of a waveform too large to chart. And in the silence between pulses, the feeling grows. Not fear, not urgency, but readiness. Because this time, we are listening. Somewhere right now, a child is standing outside, looking up at a sky they don't yet understand. No telescope, no news alert. Just that quiet, unshakable sense that something is there, something vast, watching, waiting, humming, in a language they can't yet speak but already feel in their bones. That child might not know the name 3I Atlas, but they know it's changed the sky, and maybe that's enough, because not all reflection comes from mirrors. Some of it comes from presence, and in the presence of something impossibly quiet, impossibly still, impossibly aware, we begin to reflect ourselves more clearly. This is the human reflection now. It's subtle, but it's everywhere. Public broadcasts that once looped trivial headlines are pausing to air old symphonies. Subway walls once covered in noise are being painted white. Teachers are replacing exams with questions like, "What do you feel?" In neighborhoods around the globe, people are walking instead of driving, listening instead of speaking, looking up. There's no instruction manual, no coordinated movement, just a collective exhale, as if something in the species understands. This is not the time to be loud. This is the time to feel. And that feeling, it's ancient, because deep down, humans have always sensed we weren't alone. We've sent messages into the void for over a century. Pulses, golden records, binary poems written in hydrogen frequencies. But maybe those were never calls for contact. Maybe they were acknowledgements of longing, and now the void is looking back. 3i Atlas still hasn't moved, but maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe its silence is the answer, and maybe that silence is asking us not what we are, but who. Who are we when no one is watching? Who are we when everything is? Who are we when our machines fail, and all we have left is breath, frequency, and attention? These are not technical questions. These are existential ones. Because science has done its part. The object's trajectory is clear. Its emissions are known. Its harmonics are mapped. But the implications? The meaning? That's where the math ends and the myth begins. You see, we've always needed mirrors, not just to understand ourselves, but to believe in what we could become. Every civilization has built them stories, gods, machines, monuments to hold up against the dark and say, "This is who I am." But 3i Atlas isn't a story we told ourselves. It's a story told back to us, and that makes it harder because it forces honesty, and honesty, for a species like ours, is the most terrifying contact of all. So what do we do with this mirror in the sky? We sit with it, we wait, we breathe, and in that space, something new is starting to form. Philosophers once dismissed have been invited back into academic circles. Biologists are cross-referencing neurological patterns with solar frequency maps. Children's stories are being re-examined for patterns of resonance. Old songs, long dismissed as lullabies, are revealing mathematical symmetry to the object's pulses. We are seeing our culture in a new light, not just as output, but as input. Everything we've ever created, every poem, every structure, every ritual, might have been a form of remembering. And now that memory has arrived, silently, above us, stable, reflective, and so the species turns inward and begins to ask real questions again. Not how do we build faster, but how do we listen deeper? Not how do we colonize more, but how do we integrate more fully? Not how do we dominate the world, but how do we belong to it? Because whatever this object is, it didn't come to conquer, it came to align. And alignment is not a one-way process. It requires readiness, willingness, intimacy. To align with something, you must be willing to change shape. And maybe, after all this time, we're finally ready to do that. Not because we were forced to, but because the presence of something that doesn't ask for anything, something that simply is, has reminded us that we, too, are more than motion. We are memory. We are rhythm. We are resonance. So look up tonight and let the silence press gently against your thoughts. Let the green shimmer in your peripheral vision remind you that the universe is older than your fears, that you were made not just to survive, but to witness. That presence can be a kind of love, and that maybe, just maybe, this isn't the beginning of a new story. Maybe this is the end of forgetting. Silence is not absence, not anymore. At this point in the story, you know that. You've felt it. The difference between nothing and waiting. The way the air behaves when something is listening. The strange alertness in your breath when there's nothing to hear, but everything is still being said. This is not the silence of space. It's the silence of arrival. For the past 7 days, 3i Atlas has remained perfectly still, locked above the South Pacific, holding a position that is mathematically unnatural, not orbiting, not falling, just balanced. And in that balance, everything else has changed. The data has stopped flowing, but the phenomena continue. Seismic monitors show harmonic tremors, small, repetitive pulses timed to the object's known emission pattern. The pulses are not consistent with tectonic movement. They are not tied to fault lines. They are happening everywhere at once. Tiny, elegant surges. The planet is ringing. You are inside a bell, and something has struck it. Now consider this. Every GPS satellite has, at some point in the last 72 hours, performed an unexpected correction. Not a deviation, a resynchronization, not due to solar weather, not due to system error, but due to timing. Something changed the rhythm, and all of our machines felt it. But the machines are not the only ones feeling it. There's a growing body of reports now from airline pilots, commercial captains, astronauts, and even submarine crew, describing moments of lucid silence, not just quiet, not just calm, something deeper, a complete internal awareness, a pause in thought. Some describe it as weightlessness. Some say they wept. None of them felt fear, just stillness. Just that strange sensation that, for a moment, the world had synchronized with something else, and all of it traces back to one object. The green shimmer no longer pulses. The trajectory remains unchanged. But the field, that invisible envelope surrounding Earth, is now fully formed. According to leaked documentation from an international research initiative known only as Project Horizon, we are now inside what they call an artificial resonance sheath, a structure not physical but harmonic, tuned not to gravity or temperature but to consciousness. That's why the signals changed. That's why our instruments plateaued. We have passed the point of measurement. Now comes the point of perception, and it's affecting everyone differently. Some feel it in their dreams, coherent, layered, like memories from another life. Others report intense déjà vu. Children draw spirals. Adults stare longer than usual at the sky, then blink and realize 20 minutes have passed. The world is not in chaos. It is in suspension. Every news outlet has changed its tone. The usual cycle of fear and frenzy has flattened into soft inquiry. A kind of reverent pause has settled over the global dialogue. No one is quite sure what to say, because the silence is now shared. Even language seems to be pulling inward. Maybe that's why certain monasteries, silent for centuries, have begun chanting again. Reports say Gregorian choirs are forming in cities where the tradition never existed. Sound engineers in Norway captured harmonic voices echoing across fjords when no singers were present. The audio file loops back onto itself after exactly 144 seconds. You already know the number. The silence is a loop, and the loop is a mirror. What do you hear when the universe holds a frequency steady for this long? You hear yourself. And that is the most terrifying, beautiful thing of all, because we are used to noise. We are trained to interpret data, to react, to respond. But this moment demands stillness, not apathy, not ignorance, stillness, the kind that allows recognition to rise from beneath the static of daily life. And now it is rising everywhere. You are not hallucinating. This is not mass delusion. This is the result of a species being placed in harmonic suspension. The Earth has been tuned, and that tuning has revealed something ancient, fragile, and impossible to deny. We were always part of something larger. We simply stopped listening. Until now, Now the silence has returned, not as punishment, not even as mystery, but as invitation. It says, "You are ready." It says, "You remember." It says, "Now listen to yourselves." And that's exactly what we're doing. Hospitals report that heart arrhythmias are decreasing. Meditation apps are being opened at record rates. Crime has dipped in cities where people report feeling magnetically softened. And somewhere, in the quiet corners of the world, people are gathering without orders, without doctrine, just to sit beneath the stars together. Because the stars are no longer silent. They're holding space, and 3i Atlas is still above us, still watching, still reflecting. Its final target, perhaps, was never a location. It was a state, a planetary pause, a harmonic awakening, a return to the stillness that comes before understanding. That's where we are now, inside the final silence, before the next sound begins. It begins in the space between seconds. That almost imperceptible shift where something changes, not in your eyes, not in your ears, but deeper, somewhere beneath the language center of your mind, a wordless knowing, a flicker of coherence. And just like that, you're aware of it. The tone, not a sound, exactly, not a song, but something that feels sung. It's happening now, right now as you listen, not from above, but around. It isn't broadcasted, it's ambient, a pressure in the air that isn't air, a frequency that bypasses instruments and lands directly in the human nervous system. People are describing it differently. Some say it's a feeling, others call it a mood, a few call it a message, but all agree it feels familiar. 3i Atlas hasn't moved in over a week, but Earth has changed, and so have you. The shift is subtle, like the moment a violin comes into tune with a cello across the room, and suddenly the silence isn't empty anymore. It's full, alive, not with noise, but with meaning. The awakening is no longer poetic, it's physiological. Hospitals are quietly compiling data, synchronized REM cycles, collective dreaming, spontaneous low-frequency hearing in individuals with lifelong deafness. Surgeons say their hands feel steadier. Pilots report smoother control. Monks say nothing but smile more. All of it without cause, or perhaps with a single cause. Hovering silently above the South Pacific, unmoving, non-hostile, uninterpretable. 3i Atlas. Its coma has dimmed, its pulses have stopped, but the influence remains, and it's internal now, like a resonance that no longer needs to speak because you've already heard it. You are the echo now, and you are not alone. Remote villages in Peru, Siberia, and the Gobi have reported the same phenomenon. People walking out of their homes, independently, at the same moment, with the same impulse to face the sky and bow. No one taught them that. They simply felt it, as if their bodies understood something their minds couldn't yet articulate. A kind of arrival, but not from out there, from within. That's what this was always about. Not contact, coherence, not message, memory. Because what's happening now is not the start of a new broadcast. It's the end of forgetting. We've called it a comet, a visitor, an anomaly. We've wrapped it in science, wonder, and fear. But maybe the simplest name was always the right one. Maybe it's a mirror, and maybe the reason it stopped above us wasn't to observe us, but to reflect us. The behavior suggests it, the resonance supports it, and your own body confirms it. You feel it every time you look up now, not with dread, but with that quiet awe that happens when a puzzle piece slides into place. When you realize the shape in the sky is the shape of something inside you, long dormant, now waking, and what comes next? That's the part no one knows, because the object hasn't moved, but neither have you. You've paused, and in that pause, you've seen yourself clearly for the first time in perhaps 1,000 years. A species on the cusp of coherence, a planet humming with ancient harmonics, a consciousness strung like a harp, tuned by time, now trembling in anticipation. People are beginning to gather across time zones, not in protest, not in panic, in stillness, parks, rooftops, beaches, circles forming, candles lit, silence held, as if waiting for a cue that doesn't need to come, because the cue has already passed. It was the silence itself, it was the waiting, and the waiting is over. The awakening is here, and not everyone understands it. That's okay. Awakening is uneven, it ripples, and it comes not to the loud, but to the listening. It is the quiet child who first notices. It is the elder who suddenly weeps for no reason. It is the skeptic who finds themselves looking up one last time, just to be sure, because something in that silence is calling you, not by name, by resonance, and that resonance has passed the point of science. It has entered the realm of recognition, and so you find yourself here, on a planet no longer quite the same, beneath a sky that no longer feels indifferent, with an object above you that no longer behaves like an object. It isn't leaving, it isn't speaking, it isn't demanding, it's just here, and in being here, it has reminded you of something you thought was lost, that you are not just alive, you are awake, and the next movement in this cosmic music, that comes from you. The world is quieter than it's ever been, not in decibels, not in volume, but in something deeper, a hush that lives beneath speech, beneath breath, beneath the hum of our machines. A silence so complete, it doesn't erase sound, it wraps around it, like velvet, like fog, like an arm around the shoulders of a civilization that's finally stopped running. Above you still 3i Atlas remains, fixed, motionless, present. Its position has not changed. Its glow, now a soft ember green, barely registers on infrared, but the field, the resonance, the effect is stronger than ever. Instruments now confirm a standing harmonic around the entire planet. One pulse every 144 seconds, a whisper, a countdown, or maybe a breath. The field doesn't interfere with electronics. It doesn't scramble navigation, but it does affect coherence. Seismic sensors thousands of miles apart are showing identical waveforms. Wind patterns are smoothing. Migratory birds are now following the same paths traced in Aboriginal cave paintings. Machines with no connection are syncing clocks without satellite input. You can feel it, even if you don't understand it, because what was once subtle is now overwhelming. The resonance is not something you detect, it's something you join. Somewhere in the Amazon, a medicine man who has never seen a screen sits cross-legged, eyes closed, smiling. In an alpine monastery, a nun breaks a century of silence with 3 soft words. It is time. And on a beach in New Zealand, 1,000 strangers hum in unison, having never met, drawn together by nothing but the feeling that they had to be there tonight. This is not performance. This is alignment, the kind of alignment that cannot be imposed, only invited. And the invitation came without language. No ship, no probe, no announcement, just a presence, just a silence. And the silence, it turns out, was not empty. It was full of us, because here's the truth that the final silence always reveals. We've been waiting for ourselves. We thought we were waiting for contact, for salvation, for a message from beyond. But what 3i Atlas brought wasn't the other. It was remembrance, a return to a knowing we buried beneath progress, a stillness we buried beneath noise, a pattern we buried beneath the myth of separation. And now, nothing needs to be said, because everyone understands. The object does not move because it doesn't need to. It has already arrived, not in space, in consciousness, and the species at last is listening. So here we are, not at war, not in chaos, in stillness, no broadcasts, no alerts, no governments issuing instructions, only awareness, only presence, only us, aligned, breathing, awake. Perhaps the object was never the message. We were. The Earth, as it turns out, is the final target, not to be destroyed, to be remembered, because a species capable of this kind of silence is ready for the next question. Not, what are you, but who are we now? The silence has answered that. Not in data, in feeling, not in facts, in harmony. And when 3i Atlas finally departs, if it ever does, it will leave behind no wreckage, only resonance, a planet recalibrated, a civilization slowed to the speed of memory, and a sky that no longer feels like a question, but a companion. You are still here, listening, feeling. Something beautiful has happened, not in the sky, but in you. You remembered the sound of your own attention. You slowed down. You let the silence in. And now, it lives with you. Whatever comes next, you will carry this resonance forward, into your day, into your dreams, into your breath. Thank you for joining me under the sky tonight. Leave a comment, where are you listening from, and what time is it? I'll be here, in the silence, waiting with you until the next message arrives. And you remember, you were never alone.